I never thought I would feel so invisible in my own family, especially during Christmas. That night, while my granddaughter smiled but kept glancing nervously around, I pressed play on the nanny cam footage and my heart shattered. Today, I'm going to tell you something I never thought I would share. And if for even a second this feels familiar, I only ask that you like this video and subscribe. It will help me keep opening my heart. My name is Evelyn, and I live in a modest 2-bedroom apartment in Chicago's Logan Square neighborhood. The walls are thin enough that I hear my neighbor's television through the night, and the radiator clanks like an old drum when winter settles in. From my kitchen window, I can see the Blue Line train cutting through the gray December sky, carrying people to places I used to go when I had reasons to leave this apartment. The smell of burnt coffee fills my mornings now. I make it too strong because I forget I'm only brewing for one. The apartment feels bigger when you're alone, every footstep echoing on these creaky hardwood floors that my late husband Harold and I refinished 30 years ago. He used to say they had character. Now they just sound hollow. That Christmas Eve morning, I woke up to my phone buzzing. A text from my daughter Sarah. "Mom, dinner's at 6. Don't bring anything. We have it covered." Short, businesslike. The way she's talked to me ever since she married David and moved into that Lincoln Park condo with my granddaughter Emily. The same tone she uses when she needs something from me, which happens more often than I care to admit. I spent the day getting ready anyway. I pressed my navy blue dress, the one Harold said made my eyes look like sapphires. I wrapped the gifts I'd bought for Emily, 3 books about brave girls and a soft pink sweater that cost more than I usually spend on groceries in a month. The Christmas cards I'd addressed weeks ago sat on my coffee table, stamps perfectly aligned. Sarah never sends cards anymore. Too busy, she says. The L train rocked me toward Lincoln Park that evening, and I watched the city lights blur past the frosted windows. I remembered when Sarah was little, how we used to count the Christmas decorations in windows as we rode the train to downtown Marshall Fields. She'd press her small hand against the glass and make wishes on every twinkling light we passed. When I arrived at their building, the doorman barely nodded. I'm just another grandmother visiting, I suppose. The elevator carried me up to the 14th floor, and I could hear laughter through their door before I even knocked. For a moment, I felt that old flutter of excitement. Family, Christmas, the way it's supposed to be. Emily opened the door, and my heart squeezed tight. She's 9 now, all legs and wild brown curls like Sarah had at that age. But something was different. Her smile seemed forced, and her eyes kept darting toward the corner of the living room where I knew they'd installed that nanny camera last month. Sarah had mentioned it in passing, said it helped them keep an eye on Emily when the babysitter comes. "Hi, Grandma Evie," Emily whispered, her voice smaller than usual. She hugged me quickly, but her body felt tense, like a bird ready to fly away. The apartment smelled like roasted turkey and expensive wine. Everything was perfect, from the gleaming hardwood floors to the enormous Christmas tree decorated with matching silver ornaments. No handmade decorations from Emily's school projects. No mismatched lights or crooked angel on top. It looked like something from a magazine, beautiful and cold. Sarah appeared in the doorway wearing a black cocktail dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent. "Mom, you're here," she said, air-kissing my cheek. Her perfume was sharp and unfamiliar. "David's just finishing the potatoes." I followed her into the living room, and David emerged from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a towel that matched the curtains. Everything matched in their home. He nodded at me with that tight smile he's worn since the day they got married. "Evelyn, Merry Christmas." We sat down to dinner at their glass dining table, and I tried to make conversation. I asked Emily about school, about her friends, about the books she was reading. She answered in single words while Sarah and David discussed their vacation plans for next summer, a cruise to Alaska. Emily wasn't invited. They'd leave her with the babysitter for 2 weeks. "That sounds expensive," I said before I could stop myself. David's fork clinked against his plate. "We've been saving," he said, but his eyes didn't meet mine. After dinner, we moved to the living room to exchange gifts. Emily opened her presents politely, thanking me for each book, trying on the sweater and saying it was beautiful. But she kept looking at that corner, at the small black camera mounted near the ceiling. When Sarah asked her to model the sweater, Emily's hands shook slightly as she pulled it over her head. I stayed until 9, watching Emily play with her new tablet while Sarah and David discussed their investment portfolio. Something about stocks and cryptocurrency returns, Bitcoin values, and market projections. When I mentioned that Harold and I had always kept our money in simple savings accounts, David laughed. Not meanly, but dismissively. "Things are different now, Evelyn. You have to be smart about money to build real wealth." By the time I left, carrying my Tupperware containers of leftover turkey, I felt more alone than when I'd arrived. Emily hugged me goodbye. and for just a moment she whispered in my ear, "I love you, Grandma Evie. Really, really love you." Something in her voice caught at my chest. A desperation I recognized but couldn't place. The train ride home was long and cold. I sat with my Tupperware on my lap, watching Christmas lights fade into darkness as we moved through the neighborhoods. Other passengers looked tired, probably heading home from their own family gatherings. Some looked happy. Others, like me, just looked empty. I've been supporting Sarah and her family for 3 years now, ever since David's marketing business failed. It started small. Help with Emily's school tuition when they were short 1 month, groceries when David was between contracts, the deposit on their Lincoln Park apartment when they couldn't qualify for the lease on their income alone. Then it grew. Sarah would call, usually on Sunday evenings when I was settling in to watch my shows. "Mom, I hate to ask, but David's client payments are delayed again. Could you help with the car payment just this once?" Just this once turned into every month. Car payments became insurance premiums. Insurance premiums became credit card minimums. Credit card minimums became their mortgage down payment when they decided to buy that condo. I liquidated Harold's retirement account to help them. The money he'd saved for 30 years, planning for our golden years together. After he passed, it felt right to use it for Sarah's future, for Emily's future. Harold would have wanted that. I told myself, "You're so generous, Mom," Sarah would say, usually followed by, "I don't know what we'd do without you." But generosity started to feel like obligation. Love started to feel like leverage. I remember the evening I realized something had shifted. It was last spring, and I'd brought Emily to see the cherry blossoms in Lincoln Park. We were walking along the lagoon, and she asked me why I lived in such a small apartment when her family lived in such a big one. "Well, honey, Grandma doesn't need much space," I said, "and your parents work very hard for their beautiful home." Emily was quiet for a moment, then she said, "But don't you work hard too? Mom says you're always helping people at the community center." I volunteer at the Logan Square Community Center 3 days a week, helping seniors with their medication management and benefit applications. It's not glamorous work, but it matters. At least it used to feel like it mattered. "That's different, sweetheart. That's just what grandmas do. But why can't you have beautiful things too? Out of the mouths of babes, as they say. Why couldn't I have beautiful things too?" That night, I called Sarah to ask if they could contribute something toward Harold's headstone maintenance. The cemetery had sent a notice about cleaning and maintenance fees. $150. "Oh, Mom, this month is really tight. David's biggest client just canceled their contract. Could you cover it this time? We'll pay you back next month when things stabilize." Next month came and went. The month after that, too. They never mentioned the money again, and I couldn't bring myself to ask. Have you ever felt like you're disappearing, even when you're standing right in front of people who claim to love you? That's what started happening to me. Conversations where I'd speak and no one would respond. Suggestions that were ignored or dismissed. Plans made around me, not with me. My birthday last June came and went without a card. Not a phone call. Not even a text message. I spent the day alone, eating leftover Chinese takeout and watching game shows on television. At 7 that evening, Sarah called to ask if I could babysit Emily the next weekend. Their anniversary trip to Wisconsin Dells had been booked for months, she said. "Of course," I said, because what grandmother says no to babysitting her granddaughter? "You're the best, Mom. We'll drop her off Friday after school." No mention of my birthday. No apology. Just the assumption that I'd be available, as always. Emily spent that weekend with me, and for the first time in months, I felt useful again. We made pancakes shaped like animals, visited the Museum of Science and Industry, and stayed up late watching movies and braiding each other's hair. She told me about her friends at school, about her teacher who was having a baby, about the boy who pulled her pigtails during recess. "Grandma Evie," she said as I tucked her into Harold's old recliner that night, "I wish you lived closer to us. I'm only a train ride away, sweetie. I know, but sometimes I get scared at home and I think about calling you. But Mom says I shouldn't bother you so much." Something cold settled in my stomach. Scared of what, honey? Just scared. When Mom and Dad fight about money and they think I can't hear them, they fight about you sometimes too. About me? What did they say? Emily's eyes got wide, like she'd revealed a secret. "I shouldn't tell you. Mom says some things are grown-up problems." I held her closer. "It's okay, sweetheart. You don't have to tell me anything you don't want to." But the seed was planted. Fear about money. Fear about me. What exactly were Sarah and David saying behind closed doors? The next few months passed in a blur of financial requests and polite but distant family dinners. Always at their place, never at mine. Always on their schedule, never on mine. I was useful for money and babysitting, but not for advice or genuine conversation. In September, Sarah called with exciting news. David's marketing agency was taking off again, a major client in the tech sector. Contracts worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. They were celebrating by renovating their kitchen and planning that Alaska cruise I'd heard about at Christmas. "That's wonderful, honey," I said. "I'm so happy for you both. We wanted you to know because we might not need as much help anymore. Financially, I mean." For a moment, I felt relief. Finally, they were getting back on their feet. But October came, and so did the familiar Sunday evening phone call. "Mom, I hate to ask, but the client payment got delayed again, and we've already committed to the kitchen renovation. Could you help us through this month?" November brought another call. December brought two. The morning after Christmas, I woke up feeling hollowed out. Empty. I made my bitter coffee and sat at my kitchen table, staring at the thank you card Emily had made me. It was beautiful, decorated with glitter and stickers, but even her childhood handwriting looked sad to me. That's when I remembered the nanny camera. Sarah had mentioned the brand they'd chosen when she was researching options, how it connected to an app on their phones so they could check in on Emily from anywhere, how the footage was stored in the cloud for 30 days before automatically deleting. I'm not proud of what I did next. I spent 3 hours online, reading forums and watching YouTube tutorials on accessing cloud storage accounts. It wasn't hacking exactly. Sarah had asked me to help set up her new email account last year when she was overwhelmed with work. I still remembered her password because she used the same one for everything, her maiden name and Emily's birth year. When I finally accessed the camera footage from Christmas Eve, my hands were shaking. I told myself I just wanted to see Emily playing with her gifts, maybe capture a sweet moment to screenshot and frame. What I saw instead stopped my heart. The timestamp showed 8:47 p.m., about 20 minutes before I left their apartment. Emily was alone in the living room, everyone else in the kitchen arguing about something in hushed voices. She walked over to her mother's desk in the corner, the expensive white desk that matched their living room furniture. Emily looked around carefully, then opened the bottom drawer. She pulled out a stack of papers, bank statements, and bills that I recognized from my own monthly mail. But these had David's name on them. Account balances in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. My granddaughter, my sweet 9-year-old granddaughter, was looking through financial documents that showed her parents had substantial investments while asking me to cover their basic expenses. Emily found what she was looking for. A notebook where someone, probably David, had written down account numbers and balances. Stock portfolios worth over $2 million. A cryptocurrency wallet with Bitcoin valued at nearly $500,000. Real estate investments in Florida and Colorado I'd never heard them mention. My knees gave out. I slid from my kitchen chair to the cold linoleum floor, still clutching my phone with the video playing. Emily carefully put everything back exactly as she'd found it, her small hands trembling as she closed the drawer. She turned toward the camera, and for just a moment, she looked directly into the lens with an expression far too old for her face, an expression that said she knew exactly what she'd found and exactly what it meant. They were millionaires, multi-millionaires, and they'd been systematically draining my savings account while living a life of luxury. I sat on that kitchen floor for 2 hours, replaying the footage and taking screenshots of every document Emily had revealed. Bank statements showing regular deposits of thousands of dollars, investment returns that dwarfed my entire monthly Social Security check, credit card payments made from accounts flush with money while they told me they couldn't afford groceries. The teacup I'd been holding when I first accessed the footage lay shattered next to me, pieces of Harold's mother's china scattered across the floor like my broken trust. The tea had gone cold hours ago, but I couldn't bring myself to clean up the mess. For the first time in 3 years, I allowed myself to feel angry. Not just disappointed or hurt, but blazing, righteous anger. They had stolen my money. Worse, they had stolen my dignity, my sense of purpose, my belief that I was helping family in genuine need. That night, I couldn't sleep. I walked through my small apartment, looking at all the things I'd denied myself to help them. The winter coat I'd been wearing for 8 years, held together with patches and prayers. The prescription glasses that weren't quite the right strength anymore because I couldn't afford new ones. The vacation Harold and I had planned to take after his retirement, canceled forever because I'd given away our travel fund. I thought about calling Sarah immediately, confronting her with what I'd discovered, but something held me back. Maybe it was fear. Maybe it was disbelief. Maybe it was the terrible realization that I'd been living in denial for so long that facing the truth felt more frightening than continuing the lie. Instead, I spent the weekend researching financial elder abuse. That's what this was, according to the websites I found. Financial exploitation of seniors by family members was more common than I'd ever imagined. Children and grandchildren systematically draining their elderly parents' resources while maintaining facades of financial struggle. The hardest part was realizing that I wasn't unique. I wasn't special in my generosity or unusual in my betrayal. I was a statistic, one of thousands of elderly Americans being financially abused by the very people they'd raised and loved unconditionally. Monday morning, I called the Logan Square Community Center and asked to speak with Maria Santos, the social worker who ran support groups for seniors. I'd referred other people to her programs, but never imagined I'd need them myself. "Mrs. Peterson," she said when I explained why I was calling, "I'm so sorry you're going through this, but I'm proud of you for reaching out. That takes incredible courage." "I don't feel courageous," I told her. "I feel stupid." "You're not stupid. You're loving. Unfortunately, sometimes loving people take advantage of that love." She invited me to attend a support group meeting that Thursday evening. It's specifically for seniors dealing with financial abuse by family members. You'd be surprised how many people are struggling with similar situations. Thursday evening came and I almost didn't go. The community center felt different when I was there as someone needing help instead of someone providing it. Maria led me to a small room where 6 other people sat in a circle, all of them around my age, all of them wearing the same expression of shame and confusion I saw in the mirror every morning. There was Robert, whose son had forged his signature on loan documents. Margaret, whose daughter had convinced her to sign over power of attorney and then sold her house without permission. James, whose grandson had been stealing money from his checking account for 2 years before he noticed the missing funds. When it was my turn to speak, I found myself telling strangers what I couldn't yet tell my own family. The words poured out like water through a broken dam. The years of financial support, the growing requests, the discovery of their hidden wealth. The way Emily's nervous glances at the camera suddenly made perfect sense. "My granddaughter knows," I said, my voice breaking. "She's 9 years old and she knows her parents are lying to me." Margaret reached over and squeezed my hand. "Children always know more than we think they do. The question is, what are you going to do about it?" What was I going to do about it? For 3 years, I'd been reacting to their requests, their needs, their crises. I'd never stopped to consider what I wanted, what I needed, what I deserved. That night, I made the first decision I'd made for myself in years. I was going to stop the money. No more emergency loans. No more covering their expenses. No more enabling their lie. But first, I had one more video to watch. The timestamp was from the night after Christmas, when Sarah and David thought Emily was asleep. They were in their bedroom, voices low but picked up clearly by the camera's sensitive microphone. "How much did she give us this month?" David's voice. $1,800 for the mortgage plus the Christmas money for Emily's gifts. So about $2,500 total. Sarah's voice, businesslike. "Good. That should cover the cruise deposit." "David, I'm starting to feel bad about this. She's getting older and she's giving us everything she has. She's got plenty. Social Security, Harold's pension, that little nest egg she's always talking about. Besides, it's not like we're forcing her," she offers. "Because she thinks we need it. We do need it. Just because we have investments doesn't mean we have cash flow. You know how this works, Sarah. The money's tied up in long-term assets. We can't touch the Bitcoin or the stock portfolios without major tax implications. So we're supposed to live off my mother forever? Until the market timing is right for liquidation, yes. It's a smart financial strategy. My mother. Not mom. Not even Evelyn. My mother. Like I was a resource to be managed rather than a person to be loved." The video continued for another few minutes, but I'd heard enough. They weren't struggling young parents making difficult decisions to keep their family afloat. They were wealthy adults using me as their personal bank to avoid touching their own investment portfolio. The next morning, I called my bank and asked about changing my account access. I'd added Sarah as a joint holder 2 years ago when I had the flu and needed someone to deposit my Social Security check. At the time, it seemed practical. Now, it felt like the biggest mistake I'd ever made. "I want to remove the joint account holder and open a new account," I told the representative. "Is there a problem with the current account, Mrs. Peterson?" There was a very big problem with the current account, but I wasn't ready to explain it to a stranger. "I just want to simplify my banking. One account, one owner." It took 3 hours and a mountain of paperwork. But by Thursday afternoon, I had a new checking account that only I could access. I transferred my Social Security direct deposit and closed the old account. For the first time in years, my money was entirely my own. That Friday evening, Sarah called with her weekly check-in. Usually, these calls involved some financial request disguised as family conversation, but tonight she seemed genuinely interested in how I was doing. "Mom, Emily's been asking about you all week. She wants to know when you're coming over again." "I miss her too," I said truthfully. "Actually, we were hoping you could help us out with something. David's landing this huge client next week, but we need to pay the contractor for the kitchen renovation before the check comes in. It's just a timing issue. There it was. The ask. The real reason for the call. "How much do you need?" I asked, though I already knew I wasn't giving them anything. $5,000 would cover it. "I know it's a lot, but this client is going to change everything for us. We'll be able to pay you back within the month. $5,000. More than half of my monthly income. Money that would require me to dip into the small emergency fund I kept for medical expenses or home repairs." "Let me think about it," I said. "Think about it?" Sarah's voice shifted, surprise creeping in. "Mom, you've never had to think about helping us before. Maybe that's the problem." The silence stretched between us like a chasm. I could hear David's voice in the background, asking what was wrong. "Is everything okay?" Sarah asked carefully. "Everything's fine, sweetheart. I just need to check my accounts before I commit to such a large amount." We hung up shortly after, both of us knowing something had fundamentally changed in that conversation. For the first time in 3 years, I'd said something other than yes. That weekend, I didn't answer my phone. Sarah called 6 times, David called twice, and Emily called once, her small voice asking if I was mad at her parents. That call almost broke my resolve. How do you explain to a 9-year-old that her parents have been stealing from her grandmother? Monday morning, Sarah showed up at my apartment unannounced. I opened the door to find her standing in the hallway, designer coat buttoned against the January cold, holding a coffee carrier from the expensive place near their condo. "Mom, we need to talk." I let her in because refusing would have created a scene for my neighbors, but I didn't offer to take her coat or invite her to stay long. She set the coffee on my kitchen table and sat down uninvited. "I brought your favorite, double-shot vanilla latte with oat milk." She'd remembered my coffee preference. It should have felt like love, but it felt like manipulation. "Thank you, honey." That was thoughtful. "Mom, what's going on? You've been so strange since Christmas. David's worried about you, and Emily keeps asking why Grandma won't answer her calls." "I've been thinking," I paused, choosing my words carefully, "about my financial situation, about my future." "Your financial situation? Mom, you're fine financially. You've got Dad's pension and Social Security. The house is paid off. I sold the house 3 years ago to help with their down payment." She knew that. We both knew that. "Actually, Sarah, I'm not fine. I've been living paycheck to paycheck for months, helping you and David with your expenses." Her face flushed slightly. "We never asked you to jeopardize your own security. If money is tight, you should have said something." But I had said something, multiple times. I'd mentioned my own bills, my medical expenses, the fact that I was depleting my savings to help them. Each time, the conversation had been redirected to their immediate crisis, their pressing need, their promise to pay me back as soon as David's business improved. "I'm saying something now," I said quietly. "I can't keep subsidizing your lifestyle." "Subsidizing our lifestyle?" Her voice rose. "Mom, we're not asking you to subsidize anything. We ask for help during emergencies." "Your kitchen renovation is an emergency?" She stared at me, and I watched her recalibrate her approach. The wounded daughter act wasn't working, so she tried reason. "The renovation increases the condo's value. It's an investment. And David really is about to land that major client. We just need bridge financing until the contracts are signed. What about your stock portfolio?" The words hung in the air like smoke. Sarah's face went very still, and I saw the exact moment she realized what I knew. "My what?" "Your stock portfolio. Your investment accounts. Your cryptocurrency wallet." She didn't deny it. Didn't try to explain or justify. She just sat there, watching me with calculations running behind her eyes. "How did you find out about that?" Not, "That's not true," or "I can explain." Just, "How did you find out?" Confirmation that everything I'd discovered was real. Does it matter how I found out? What matters is that it exists. Millions of dollars in assets while you tell me you can't afford groceries. Mom, it's not that simple. Those investments are long-term holdings. We can't access them without significant tax penalties. So you access mine instead. You offered to help us. Because I thought you needed help, not because I wanted to finance your luxury lifestyle while you built a fortune. Sarah stood up, her coffee untouched. "I think you're upset about something else entirely. Maybe you should talk to someone about this paranoia." Paranoia. The word hit like a slap. I was paranoid for discovering their deception. I was paranoid for feeling betrayed by their lies. I was paranoid for wanting honesty from my own daughter. "Get out," I said quietly. "Mom, let's not do this. We're family. Get out of my apartment, Sarah." She gathered her coat and purse, pausing at the door. "When you're ready to have a rational conversation about this, call me. But I won't be spoken to like I'm some kind of criminal." After she left, I sat in my kitchen holding that expensive coffee she'd brought as a peace offering, and I realized something important. I wasn't sad. I wasn't hurt or confused or guilty. I was angry, and anger felt like power. For 3 years, I'd been afraid of losing my family if I said no to their requests. But what family were we, really? What kind of daughter systematically steals from her mother? What kind of son-in-law refers to his wife's elderly mother as a financial resource to be managed? That afternoon, I called Maria Santos at the community center and asked about legal aid resources for elder financial abuse. There's a clinic at the Chicago Bar Association, she told me. They provide free consultations for seniors dealing with financial exploitation. Would you like me to help you make an appointment? 2 days later, I sat across from Jennifer Walsh, a lawyer in her 40s who specialized in elder law. I showed her the screenshots from the camera footage, the bank records showing my money flowing into their accounts, the documentation of their hidden assets. Mrs. Peterson, this is a clear case of financial exploitation. Your daughter and her husband have been systematically deceiving you to gain access to your resources while hiding their own wealth. What can I do about it? Several things. First, we can send a cease and desist letter demanding they return the money they've obtained through deception. Second, we can freeze any accounts they have access to. Third, if necessary, we can pursue civil action for recovery of your funds. The legal process felt overwhelming, but Jennifer explained each step patiently. The most important thing was documenting everything and cutting off their access to additional funds. Do you want to pursue criminal charges? She asked. I just want my money back, and I want them to stop lying to me. We started with a formal letter. Jennifer drafted it in legal language that made their theft sound exactly like what it was: fraud. We requested return of all funds obtained through deception, totaling nearly $60,000 over 3 years. I hand-delivered the letter on a Thursday afternoon, taking the L train to Lincoln Park and walking to their building. The doorman called up to announce me, and David came down instead of Sarah. Evelyn, what's this about? Sarah said you two had some kind of misunderstanding. It's all explained in the letter, I said, handing him the official envelope. Read it carefully. I turned to walk away, but he called after me. This is really how you want to handle a family disagreement? With lawyers? I turned back to look at him. This man who'd been living in luxury, funded by my Social Security checks while calling me paranoid for noticing. You made it a legal issue when you started stealing from me, David. His face flushed red. We didn't steal anything. You gave us that money willingly, based on lies about your financial situation. We never lied about anything. But even as he said it, his voice lacked conviction. He knew what they'd done. They both knew. That evening, Sarah called. Not her usual friendly check-in tone, but clipped and angry. Mom, we got your lawyer's letter. This is insane. What's insane is discovering that my daughter has been lying to me for 3 years. We haven't been lying. We've been protecting our investments while building financial security for Emily's future. By stealing mine? Stop calling it stealing. You offered to help us. I offered to help you because you told me you were struggling financially. We are struggling with cash flow. You have millions of dollars in assets, tied up in long-term investments. We were going in circles, the same justifications and denials. I realized that Sarah genuinely believed her own narrative. In her mind, accessing my money while hiding their wealth wasn't theft. It was financial strategy. Sarah, I'm going to ask you one direct question, and I want one direct answer. Do you and David have substantial assets that you've hidden from me while asking for financial help? Silence stretched between us. Yes, she finally said. But it's complicated. It's not complicated. You're wealthy people who have been pretending to be poor to steal money from your elderly mother. We're not stealing anything. And stop calling yourself elderly like you're some helpless victim. I'm 73 years old, Sarah. I am elderly. And yes, I have been your victim. She hung up on me. The next few weeks passed in tense silence. I didn't call them, and they didn't call me. I found myself wondering about Emily, how she was processing the tension she could certainly feel, whether she was asking questions about why Grandma didn't visit anymore. February brought a response to Jennifer's letter, not from Sarah or David, but from their own attorney. A formal denial of all claims, assertion that any money received was gifted freely, and a counter threat of harassment charges if I continued pursuing the matter. This is standard, Jennifer assured me. They're hoping to intimidate you into dropping the case. Are you prepared to move forward with civil action? I thought about it for a week. Civil action meant months of legal proceedings, depositions, court appearances. It meant making our family dispute public record. It meant burning bridges that might never be rebuilt. But it also meant standing up for myself in a way I'd never done before. Yes, I told Jennifer. Let's move forward. The lawsuit was filed in March, requesting return of all funds obtained through deceptive practices, plus interest and legal fees. The local news picked up the story because financial elder abuse was becoming a widespread issue, and my case was particularly egregious given the defendant's hidden wealth. Sarah called me after the news story aired, crying, "Mom, they're calling us criminals on television. Emily's friends are asking her about it at school. For a moment, I almost wavered. Emily didn't deserve to be embarrassed by her parents' actions. You should have thought about Emily before you started stealing from her grandmother. We didn't steal anything. God, why won't you stop saying that? Because it's what happened, sweetheart. You took money from me under false pretenses. In any other context, we'd call that theft. You're destroying our family over money. You destroyed our family when you decided to lie to me for 3 years. She hung up again, but this time I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Peace. March turned into April, and the legal process moved slowly forward. Jennifer subpoenaed their financial records, documenting the full extent of their wealth. Investment accounts worth over $3 million, real estate holdings in 3 states, a cryptocurrency portfolio that had grown to nearly $1 million in value. They'd been millionaires the entire time they were asking me to help with grocery money. The discovery phase revealed something else that took my breath away. They'd been planning to ask me to co-sign a loan for a vacation home in Colorado, using my credit and my commitment, but not my knowledge of their ability to afford it independently. They were setting you up for even larger financial liability, Jennifer explained. If this pattern had continued, you could have lost everything. In May, their attorney approached Jennifer about settlement discussions. They wanted to avoid a trial, but weren't willing to admit fault or accept full financial responsibility. What are they offering? I asked. $20,000 and a mutual non-disclosure agreement. $20,000. Out of the $60,000 they'd taken from me, they were willing to return 1/3 and pretend none of it ever happened. What do you recommend? I recommend we go to trial. Your case is strong and their settlement offer is insulting. But I was tired. Tired of fighting. Tired of lawyers. Tired of having my family drama discussed in legal briefs and court documents. Most of all, I was tired of centering my life around people who'd proven they didn't respect or love me the way I'd loved them. Let me think about it, I told her. That evening, I sat on my small balcony overlooking Logan Square, watching the EL train carry people home from their jobs and their lives. The city felt different than it had 6 months ago. I felt different. Mrs. Alvarez from across the hall knocked on my door with a plate of homemade enchiladas. How are you holding up, mija? She asked. She'd been following my story with the supportive outrage of someone who'd raised 5 children and knew manipulation when she saw it. I'm okay, I said, and realized I meant it. Better than okay, actually. You look different. Stronger. I felt stronger. For the first time in years, I was making decisions based on what I wanted rather than what other people needed from me. It was terrifying and liberating at the same time. Maria, can I ask you something? How do you know when you're done fighting? She sat down at my kitchen table, considering the question seriously. When the fight is taking more from you than you're trying to get back. That night, I called Jennifer and told her I wanted to accept a modified settlement. $40,000, no non-disclosure agreement, and a written acknowledgement that they'd received money from me under false pretenses. It wasn't everything I'd lost, but it was enough to restore my financial security and my sense of dignity. Are you sure? She asked. We could get more at trial. I'm sure. I want this finished. The settlement was finalized in June. Sarah and David agreed to return $40,000 and acknowledge in writing that they'd misrepresented their financial situation to obtain money from me. In exchange, I agreed not to pursue further legal action. The money was deposited into my new bank account on a Tuesday morning. I sat in the bank lobby after confirming the transfer, trying to process what closure felt like. But closure, I discovered, is more complicated than legal resolution. Emily called me that afternoon, her first contact since the story had made local news. Grandma Evie? Mom said I could call you. Oh, sweetheart. I'm so happy to hear your voice. How are you doing? I'm okay. Are you mad at me? The question broke my heart. Emily, honey, I could never be mad at you. None of this is your fault. But I knew about the money stuff. I saw the papers in Mom's desk and I knew it was wrong, but I didn't tell you. My 9-year-old granddaughter had been carrying guilt about her parents' deception, living with the knowledge that her family was lying to someone she loved. Emily, you're a little girl. It's not your job to fix grown-up problems. Are you going to visit us again? I didn't know how to answer that question. The legal dispute was resolved, but the relationship damage felt permanent. How do you trust people who've proven they'll lie to you without hesitation? How do you love people who've systematically exploited that love? I don't know, sweetheart. Your parents and I need to figure some things out first. I miss you. I miss you too. So much. After we hung up, I cried for the first time since this whole ordeal began. Not from sadness or anger, but from grief. Grief for the family I'd thought I had, for the trust that had been broken, for the innocence my granddaughter had lost watching her parents deceive someone she loved. July brought an unexpected visitor. Sarah appeared at my door on a Saturday morning, looking smaller than I remembered. No designer coat, no expensive coffee peace offering. Just my daughter, looking tired and uncertain. "Can we talk?" she asked. I let her in, but this time I didn't offer to make coffee or invite her to stay. We sat across from each other at my kitchen table, the same table where we'd shared so many meals when she was growing up, where she'd done homework while I cooked dinner, where she'd cried over her first heartbreak and her divorce from Emily's father. "I've been thinking about what you said," she began, "about trust and honesty." "Okay, you're right. We should have been honest about our financial situation. Should have been honest, not we lied or we deceived you." Still minimizing, still protecting herself from the full weight of what they'd done. "Sarah, do you understand why I'm so hurt? Really understand?" She was quiet for a long moment. "Because we took your money? Because you lied to me. For 3 years. Every time you called asking for help, you were lying. We needed cash flow management while our investments matured. You needed my money while your money grew. There's a difference." Another long silence. "What do you want from me, Mom? I can't change what happened. I want you to acknowledge what happened. Really acknowledge it. I just said, you said you should have been more honest. That's not the same as admitting you deliberately deceived me to access my money while hiding your wealth." She looked at me with something approaching recognition. "Would that make a difference if I said that exactly?" "It might." She took a breath. "We deliberately deceived you about our financial situation to access your money while hiding our wealth." The words hung between us. It should have felt like victory, but instead it felt like loss. My daughter had just admitted to systematically betraying my trust, and neither of us seemed to know what came next. "Why?" I asked. "Because it was easy. Because you never said no. Because David convinced me it was smart financial planning." She paused. "Because I knew you'd do anything for Emily and me, and we took advantage of that." Finally, the truth I'd been waiting months to hear. "Thank you for saying that. Does it change anything?" I thought about it. Did it change anything? The money was returned. The legal case was closed. The truth was acknowledged. But trust, once broken, doesn't repair itself with apologies. "I don't know yet." She nodded. "I understand. I just want you to know that Emily asks about you every day. She's having nightmares about losing you completely." That night, I called Emily and asked if she wanted to spend the weekend with me. Sarah agreed readily, perhaps hoping it was a sign of forgiveness. When Emily arrived that Friday evening, she was quieter than usual, but seemed relieved to be away from her parents' house. We made spaghetti with too much cheese, watched movies that were probably too old for her, and talked about everything except the family drama that had dominated the past 6 months. Saturday morning, she helped me water the small herb garden I'd started on my balcony. We were tending the basil plants when she said, "Grandma Evie, are you still mad at Mom and Dad?" "I'm not mad anymore, sweetheart, but I'm still hurt." "What's the difference?" How do you explain complex emotions to a 9-year-old? When you're mad, you want to fight back. When you're hurt, you just want the pain to stop. "Do you still love them?" "Yes, but love and trust are different things." She thought about this while deadheading the marigolds. "I love them too, but sometimes they make me sad." "How do they make you sad?" "When they fight about money, when they say things about you that aren't nice, when they make me keep secrets." My granddaughter had been living with the emotional weight of her parents' deception, carrying secrets and managing loyalties that no child should have to navigate. "Emily, what kind of secrets?" "Like when they got mad at you for asking about the money, Dad said you were getting too nosy, and maybe we should spend less time at your apartment. But then Mom said we still needed you to babysit sometimes, so they decided to just be more careful about what they said around you." They'd been strategizing about how to manage me, how to maintain access to my financial support while limiting my access to information that might reveal their deception. Did that make you feel bad? "Yeah. Because I love spending time with you, and they were talking about you like you were a problem instead of my grandma." That evening, Emily and I made chocolate chip cookies and talked about school, her friends, her favorite books. Normal grandmother-granddaughter conversation that felt precious after months of family chaos. But Sunday night, when Sarah came to pick her up, the tension returned immediately. "Did you have a good time with Grandma?" Sarah asked, but her eyes were on me, trying to read whether Emily had revealed anything problematic. "We made cookies and watered the garden and watched old movies," Emily said diplomatically. "That sounds nice. Did you talk about anything important?" Emily looked between us. "We talked about lots of things." I could see Sarah wanting to probe further, but not willing to cross-examine her daughter in front of me. After they left, I sat in my quiet apartment and realized something important. I couldn't continue having a relationship with Emily that required navigating around her parents' ongoing deception and manipulation. Either we addressed the fundamental trust issues, or we maintained distance that protected everyone involved. August brought a phone call from David. Not Sarah this time, but her husband, speaking in the business-like tone he used for important negotiations. Evelyn, I think we should meet and discuss the family situation. Clear the air. What's to discuss? The legal matter is resolved. The legal matter, yes, but we still have family connections to consider. Emily misses you. I miss her too. Then let's figure out a way forward. Can you meet me for coffee tomorrow morning? Against my better judgment? I agreed. We met at a neutral place. A Starbucks in Lincoln Park that was busy enough to prevent emotional outbursts, but quiet enough for serious conversation. David arrived precisely on time, dressed in the expensive casual clothes that I now knew were funded by investment returns rather than business struggles. Thank you for meeting with me, he said, settling into his chair with coffee and a pastry that probably cost more than I spent on groceries in a day. What did you want to discuss? I want to apologize. That stopped me cold. In all the months of legal back and forth, neither Sarah nor David had actually apologized. Okay, I'm listening. What we did was wrong. We should have been honest about our financial situation, instead of letting you believe we needed your help to cover basic expenses. It was more accountability than I'd gotten from Sarah, but something in his delivery felt calculated, like he'd practiced this conversation. Thank you for saying that. I also want to explain why it happened. Not to excuse it, but so you understand our thinking. Here came the justification I'd been expecting. When Sarah's first marriage ended, she was financially devastated. No savings, no assets, just debt and a small child. We met during that difficult time, and part of what attracted me to her was her resilience in the face of financial hardship. I didn't respond, just waited for him to continue. When we got married, I was determined to never let her experience that vulnerability again. I started investing aggressively, building assets that could provide long-term security. But that meant tying up cash in investments that weren't easily accessible. So you used mine instead. We used your willingness to help as bridge financing while our investments grew. In our minds, we were protecting our capital gains while ensuring Emily's future security. And what about my future security? We assumed you had steady income from Social Security and Harold's pension. We didn't realize our requests were impacting your daily living expenses. But that was a lie. I'd mentioned multiple times that money was getting tight, that I was struggling to cover my own bills. They'd either ignored those comments or dismissed them as normal elderly complaints. David, I told you several times that I was depleting my savings to help you. I thought you were being modest about your resources. Elderly people often understate their financial situation for security reasons. Elderly people. There was that dismissive language again, reducing my concerns to stereotypical behavior rather than legitimate information. So what's changed now? Why the apology? Because I've realized that regardless of our intentions, we hurt you. And regardless of our financial reasoning, we violated your trust. That sounded more genuine than his earlier explanations. What do you want from me going forward? I want Emily to have a relationship with her grandmother without it being complicated by adult conflicts. I want Sarah to be able to call her mother without it turning into an argument about money. I want to find a way to rebuild some level of family function. And what would that look like practically? Regular visits with Emily, maybe once a month. Family dinners occasionally when everyone's comfortable. No discussion of financial matters between adults. No requests for money. No offers of money. Just normal family interactions. It sounded reasonable in theory, but I wondered about the reality. Could we actually compartmentalize the past and function as a normal family? Could I trust them not to manipulate situations involving Emily? Could they respect boundaries without constant testing? I need to think about it, I said. Of course. But Evelyn, I hope you'll consider it. Emily needs her grandmother, and honestly, I think we could all benefit from some family normalcy. That evening, I called the support group hotline and spoke with Maria Santos. It sounds like he's making a genuine effort, she said after I explained the conversation. The question is whether you're ready to engage with them again, and what boundaries you need in place to feel safe doing so. How do I know if I can trust them? You don't. Trust is rebuilt slowly, through consistent behavior over time. The question is whether you're willing to give them the opportunity to demonstrate change. What if they manipulate Emily to pressure me? Then you'll know they haven't really changed, and you can adjust your boundaries accordingly. I spent the next week thinking about David's proposal. On one hand, I missed Emily desperately and wanted to be part of her life. On the other hand, I'd worked hard to establish independence and self-respect, and I didn't want to compromise that for the illusion of family harmony. Finally, I called Sarah and suggested we start small. One afternoon visit with Emily every other week at my apartment to see how everyone handled the dynamic. The first visit was awkward. Emily seemed uncertain about what was safe to talk about, and I found myself self-censoring to avoid topics that might create conflict with her parents. but we managed to have fun baking cookies and playing board games. The second visit was easier. Emily began to relax, and I felt more natural in my role as grandmother rather than family problem. By the fourth visit, Emily felt comfortable enough to mention that her parents had been talking about buying a bigger house now that money wasn't so stressful anymore. She said it innocently, but it confirmed what I'd suspected. They were spending freely now that they weren't supporting me financially. The fifth visit brought unexpected news. Emily told me her parents were planning a big vacation for her birthday, a trip to Disney World that would cost thousands of dollars. They said we can afford it now because we're not helping Grandma Evie with her bills anymore, she said matter-of-factly. It shouldn't have stung, but it did. The casual way they'd rewritten history, casting their theft as help they'd been providing to me. That evening, I called Sarah to clarify the story Emily had heard. Mom, she's just a kid. She misunderstood what we said. What exactly did you say? We told her that our financial situation had improved recently. Because you're not stealing from me anymore. Because we resolved our cash flow issues. God, do we have to relitigate this every time we talk? Sarah, you can't tell Emily that you used to help me with bills. That's not what happened. I'm not going to confuse her with complicated adult financial details. The truth isn't complicated. You took money from me, not the other way around. Fine. I'll be more careful about how we discuss financial changes. But I could hear the irritation in her voice, the sense that I was being difficult and demanding. They wanted to move forward without acknowledging the past, and I was insisting on honesty that made them uncomfortable. September brought school activities for Emily, and Sarah started asking me to babysit during evening events. Not emergencies, but conveniences. Parent-teacher conferences, school fundraisers, date nights. I said yes to some requests and no to others, trying to establish a pattern of availability without total accommodation. But each request felt like a test of whether I was back to normal or still holding grudges. October brought the news that Emily's school was doing a Grandparents' Day program, and Emily wanted me to attend. I was thrilled until Sarah mentioned that it was during David's important client meeting, so they were hoping I could pick Emily up afterward and keep her for the evening. Of course, I said, because refusing would disappoint Emily. But after I hung up, I realized they'd manipulated the situation perfectly. They'd made spending time with my granddaughter contingent on providing childcare services, ensuring I couldn't enjoy the school event without also meeting their needs. At the school program, I watched Emily proudly introduce me to her friends and teachers, and I felt the pure joy of being her grandmother without any adult complications. But when I took her home afterward, the familiar weight of obligation settled on my shoulders. Grandma Evie, she said as we made dinner together, are you happy now? What do you mean, sweetheart? Are you happy with Mom and Dad? Are you happy with me? I knelt down to her eye level. I am always happy with you, Emily. Always. You are the best thing in my life. But are you happy with Mom and Dad? How do you answer that question honestly without burdening a 10-year-old with adult relationship problems? I'm working on it, honey. Sometimes it takes time to fix things that get broken. Were they really mean to you before? They made some choices that hurt my feelings, but they're trying to do better now. Do you forgive them? I'm working on that too. That night, after Sarah picked Emily up, I sat on my balcony with a cup of tea and thought about forgiveness. I'd been assuming that forgiveness was binary. Either I forgave them completely and returned to normal relationships, or I maintained distance and resentment. But maybe forgiveness was more nuanced than that. Maybe I could forgive them for being flawed people who'd made terrible decisions without pretending those decisions hadn't revealed fundamental character issues. Maybe I could love them while maintaining boundaries that protected me from future exploitation. November came with Sarah's birthday, the first one since our legal battle ended. I bought her a small gift, nothing expensive, and sent a card with a simple, happy birthday message. She called to thank me, and we had the first genuinely pleasant conversation we'd shared in over a year. No undercurrents of conflict or manipulation, just a mother and daughter talking about normal things. Mom, I've been thinking about what you said, about trust. Oh, I know it's going to take time to rebuild that, but I want you to know that I understand why you're being careful with us. Thank you for understanding. And I want you to know that I tell Emily good things about you. Always. Whatever problems we have as adults, I never want her to think you're anything less than wonderful. That meant more to me than she probably realized. December arrived with Christmas approaching, and I found myself anxious about holiday plans. Last year's Christmas had been the beginning of my awakening to their deception. This year felt like a test of whether we could create new traditions based on honesty rather than exploitation. Emily called to ask what I wanted for Christmas. Time with you, I said honestly. Mom says we can't afford big presents this year because we're saving for the house. Another small lie. They could afford anything they wanted, they just weren't willing to spend their investment returns on gifts. The best presents don't cost money, sweetheart. Like what? Like homemade cookies? Like reading stories together? Like teaching you how to knit? You could teach me to knit? I would love to teach you to knit. Christmas Eve came, and they invited me for dinner again. This time, I arrived with realistic expectations rather than desperate hope for family warmth. Emily had made me a card decorated with glitter and photos of us together from our recent visits. Sarah had cooked a nice meal. Nothing elaborate, but thoughtful. David was polite and engaged in conversation that didn't feel forced. For a few hours, we felt like a normal family. Not perfect, not without undercurrents of our complicated history, but functional. As I was leaving, Emily hugged me tightly and whispered, "This was better than last year." Yes, it was better than last year. Not because the problems were solved, but because we'd all learned to manage our expectations and interactions differently. The train ride home was peaceful. I watched the Christmas lights blur past the windows and thought about the year that was ending. I'd lost some illusions about family love being unconditional. I'd gained some clarity about my own worth and boundaries. Neither loss nor gain was entirely comfortable, but both felt necessary. That night, I called Mrs. Alvarez to thank her for her support throughout this difficult year. "Mija, you did something very brave. You stood up for yourself when it would have been easier to keep accepting mistreatment. I'm still not sure I did the right thing. The right thing isn't always the easy thing, but you protected yourself, and you taught your granddaughter that love shouldn't cost everything you have." New Year's Eve found me at home, watching the celebration on television with a glass of wine and a plate of cheese and crackers. I wasn't lonely. For the first time in years, being alone felt like a choice rather than an abandonment. At midnight, I made a resolution to continue building a life that didn't depend on other people's approval or need for my resources. To love my granddaughter without sacrificing my dignity. To maintain family relationships without losing myself in them. January brought a phone call from Emily, now 10 years old and more articulate about her feelings. "Grandma Evie, can I ask you something grown up?" "Of course, sweetheart. Are you proud of yourself for fighting with Mom and Dad?" The question surprised me. "What do you mean?" Mrs. Rodriguez at school said her grandma had to fight with her family about money too, and she said her grandma was very brave. "Are you proud of being brave?" I thought about it carefully. Was I proud? Or just relieved that it was over? I'm proud that I learned to stand up for myself, but I'm sad that I had to. Do you think they learned anything? Out of the mouths of babes, what do you think they learned? I think they learned that you're not just their helper, that you're a person with feelings. My 10-year-old granddaughter had understood the fundamental issue better than the adults involved. I think you're right, Emily. That conversation stayed with me for weeks. Emily was growing up watching how adults navigate conflict, honesty, and reconciliation. What I chose to model for her mattered more than my comfort level with family dynamics. March brought news that Sarah was pregnant again, her second child at 42. She called to tell me personally, her voice nervous but excited. "Mom, I wanted you to hear this from me. We're having another baby." "Oh, Sarah, that's wonderful news. How are you feeling?" "Tired but happy, and nervous about managing Emily and a baby and everything else." There was something in her tone that suggested this was a lead-up to a request for help. Not financial this time, but practical support. "I'm here if you need me," I said carefully. "Actually, I was hoping we could talk about that, about what kind of help would feel comfortable for you to offer." The fact that she was asking for my comfort level rather than assuming my availability felt like growth. We met for coffee the next week, and Sarah explained that they'd like occasional babysitting help with Emily once the baby came, but they wanted to pay me for it. "Pay me? Sarah, I don't need to be paid to spend time with my granddaughter." "I know, but we want this to feel fair. We don't want you to feel like we're taking advantage of your generosity again." It was the closest she'd come to acknowledging that they'd taken advantage of me before. "What would feel fair to you?" I asked. "Market rate for babysitting, plus we cover any expenses when Emily's with you. Movies, meals out, activities. We want you to enjoy time with her without it costing you anything." For the first time in our relationship, they were offering to support me financially rather than the reverse. That sounds very fair. The baby was born in September, a healthy girl they named Grace. Emily was thrilled to be a big sister and eager to share stories about the baby during our visits. When Grace was 6 weeks old, Sarah asked if I could watch Emily for a Saturday, while they handled some baby-related errands. They paid me $50 for 4 hours of grandmother time and left money for Emily and me to go shopping and have lunch. It felt surreal. Being compensated for family time that I'd have gladly given for free, but also being treated like my time had value rather than being assumed to be freely available. Emily and I spent the afternoon at the Art Institute, looking at paintings and talking about colors and shapes and stories. She asked thoughtful questions about the artwork, and I realized she was developing into a person with her own interests and opinions rather than just being my adorable granddaughter. That evening, when Sarah came to pick her up, Emily showed her mother the museum brochures and excitedly described her favorite painting. "It sounds like you had a wonderful time," Sarah said. And for the first time in years, she looked genuinely grateful for my involvement in Emily's life. October brought Emily's 11th birthday, and they included me in the planning from the beginning. Not as the grandmother who could be counted on to fund whatever they wanted, but as a family member whose input and presence mattered. The party was small but thoughtful, with Emily's closest friends and a homemade cake that Sarah and I decorated together. David grilled burgers in their backyard, and I found myself having normal conversations with the other parents about school and activities and everyday life. Later, as we cleaned up, Sarah said, "Mom, I keep meaning to tell you something." "What's that?" "You look happier than I've seen you in years." I thought about it. Did I look happier? I felt different, certainly. More grounded, more confident in my own worth. I think I am happier. I'm glad. I know this year has been hard for everyone, but seeing you strong and independent, it's good for Emily to see that. What do you mean? She used to worry about you, about whether you were okay financially, whether you were lonely. Now she talks about how proud she is of her brave grandma who has her own apartment and her own life. Emily was proud of me, not for what I could provide, but for who I was becoming. November came with the news that David's business was genuinely thriving now. Not the exaggerated success stories they'd used to manipulate me, but real growth that would provide long-term financial stability. "We're thinking about buying that house we looked at last spring," Sarah told me during one of our monthly dinners. "That's exciting. Emily must be thrilled about having a bigger yard." "She is, but she's also worried about being farther away from you." The house they were considering was in Evanston, a lovely area but much farther from my Logan Square apartment. "We could still see each other regularly," I said. "I was hoping you'd say that. Actually, David and I have been talking about something." Here it comes, I thought. The request. The favor. The assumption that I'd rearrange my life to accommodate theirs. "We'd like to help you move to a nicer apartment. Closer to us, but not so close that we're in each other's business every day." I stared at her. They wanted to help me move? "Sarah, I love my apartment." "I know you do. But Mom, you've been there for 15 years. Wouldn't you like something bigger? Maybe with a dishwasher and air conditioning?" "I can't afford a bigger apartment." "That's what I'm trying to tell you. We'd like to help with that. Not by paying your rent," she added quickly, "but by helping with security deposits and moving expenses and maybe supplementing the difference for the first year while you adjust." They wanted to support me. After years of me supporting them, they were offering to use their financial resources to improve my quality of life. "Why?" I asked. "Because you deserve better than what you have, and because we can afford to help now without it impacting our own security. And because," David added, joining the conversation, "we owe you more than what we paid back through the legal settlement." It was the most direct acknowledgement of their debt to me that I'd ever heard from him. I didn't answer immediately. The offer was generous, but I'd worked hard to establish independence. Did accepting help mean giving up autonomy? Can I think about it? Of course. But Mom, this isn't charity. This is family taking care of family the way it's supposed to work. That phrase stayed with me. Family taking care of family the way it's supposed to work. Not exploitation disguised as need, but genuine care offered freely. I spent 2 weeks looking at apartments in Rogers Park and Uptown, areas that would put me closer to Emily's new school but maintain my independence. I found a beautiful one-bedroom with hardwood floors, big windows, and yes, both a dishwasher and air conditioning. Sarah and David kept their promise. They covered the security deposit and first month's rent, hired movers, and helped me shop for new furniture to fit the larger space. Emily picked out paint colors for the walls and helped me arrange books on the new shelves. The night I spent my first night in the new apartment, I sat by the window overlooking Lake Michigan and reflected on the journey that had brought me here. 2 years ago, I'd been drowning in financial requests while feeling increasingly invisible to my own family. Now I was living in a beautiful space, surrounded by evidence of my own worth and my family's genuine care. Emily called while I was watching the sunset over the lake. "Grandma Evie, how do you like your new house?" "It's an apartment, sweetheart, but I love it." "Mom says you can see the lake from your window." "I can. It's beautiful. I'm proud of you for moving somewhere nice." "Thank you, honey. I'm proud of you for being such a thoughtful granddaughter." "Grandma Evie?" "Yes?" "I love you more than all the money in the world. More than all the money in the world." From a child who'd watched money become a source of conflict and pain in her family, those words carried extra weight. "I love you more than all the money in the world, too, Emily." December came again. bringing the second Christmas since my awakening to their financial deception. This year, there was no anxiety, no desperate hope for acceptance, no fear of being used. Christmas Eve dinner was at their old apartment, one last celebration before they moved to the house in Evanston. Emily had learned to knit and presented me with a slightly crooked scarf she'd made in my favorite purple color. "It's not perfect," she said apologetically. "It's absolutely perfect because you made it for me." Sarah gave me framed photos of Emily from the past year, pictures I'd never seen that showed my granddaughter growing and changing in ways I'd missed during our months of estrangement. David's gift surprised me most. A small painting of the Logan Square L stop, the view I'd watched from my old apartment window for so many years. "I commissioned it from a local artist," he explained. "I wanted you to have something that honored where you came from." Where I came from? The modest apartment where I'd learned to value myself, where I'd made the decision to stop accepting mistreatment, where I'd discovered my own strength. After dinner, we sat in their living room surrounded by boxes and talked about their house hunting process, Emily's adjustment to middle school, baby Grace's developing personality, normal family conversation, no financial undercurrents, no manipulation, no hidden agendas, just people who cared about each other sharing their lives. As I was getting ready to leave, Sarah said, "Mom, thank you." "For what?" "For fighting for yourself, for teaching Emily that love shouldn't cost everything you have, for showing all of us that family relationships work better when they're based on respect instead of need." On the train ride home to my Lakeview apartment, I thought about the year that was ending. I'd started it in legal conflict with my daughter, uncertain about whether our relationship could survive the truth about their financial deception. I was ending it with a family that functioned differently, but more honestly. Trust had been rebuilt slowly, through consistent behavior over time. Sarah and David had proven they could respect boundaries, value my time, and contribute to my well-being instead of just benefiting from it. Most importantly, Emily was growing up seeing healthy relationship dynamics. She'd watched her parents make mistakes and work to repair them. She'd seen her grandmother demand respect and receive it. She'd learned that love could exist alongside accountability. New Year's Eve found me in my new apartment, but this time I wasn't alone. Emily was spending the night with me, a planned sleepover rather than emergency babysitting. We made popcorn and hot chocolate and watched the ball drop on television while Grace slept in the portable crib Sarah had brought over. "Grandma Evie," Emily said as we watched fireworks on TV, "what do you wish for in the new year?" "More time with you. More beautiful sunsets from this window. More days when I feel proud of the choices I make. I wish for Mom and Dad to keep being nicer to you. They've been much nicer lately." "I know. But I remember when they weren't, and I don't want that to happen again." My granddaughter was still carrying some worry about family dynamics, still protective of our relationship. "Emily, if anything ever feels wrong again, you can always talk to me about it, okay?" "Okay." But I think they learned their lesson. At midnight, we sang Auld Lang Syne and made resolutions. Emily resolved to read 50 books in the new year. I resolved to take a painting class and maybe travel somewhere I'd never been. February brought news that Sarah's pregnancy with Grace had been more complicated than she'd let on, involving financial stress about medical expenses that she and David had handled without asking me for help. She told me about it months later, almost casually. "We thought about calling you when the specialist bills started piling up," she admitted. "But David said we needed to figure it out ourselves." "How did you manage?" "We liquidated some of our stock investments, lost money on taxes and early withdrawal penalties, but it was the right thing to do. They'd chosen to use their own resources rather than exploit mine, even when facing genuine financial pressure." "I'm proud of you for handling it yourselves," I said. "It felt good to not burden you with our problems." Burden. For the first time, she acknowledged that their financial requests had been burdens, rather than opportunities for me to show love. March brought Emily's 12th birthday and news that she'd been accepted into her first-choice high school program, a competitive arts magnet school that would nurture her growing interest in visual design. The birthday celebration was at their new house in Evanston, a charming 2-story home with a big backyard and a front porch that reminded me of houses from my childhood. Emily had invited 12 friends, and I watched her navigate social dynamics with increasing confidence. She was becoming a young woman with her own opinions and interests, no longer the anxious child who'd worried about family conflicts she couldn't control. During the party, one of Emily's friends asked me about my job. "I'm retired," I said, "but I volunteer at a community center helping seniors with benefits applications and medication management." "That sounds really important," she said. Emily beamed with pride. "My grandma helps people who don't have anyone else to help them." Later, as we cleaned up, Emily said, "Grandma Evie, do you think I could volunteer with you sometimes? When I'm older? I would love that, sweetheart. I want to help people like you do." That night, Driving home in the car David had insisted I borrow rather than taking public transportation late at night, I reflected on legacy. What was I teaching Emily about relationships, about self-worth, about how to treat people you love? For the first time, I felt confident that the lessons were good ones. April brought spring cleaning and the discovery of old photo albums I'd packed away during the worst of my conflict with Sarah and David. Pictures from Emily's early childhood, family vacations, holidays when everyone looked genuinely happy. Looking at those photos now, I could see things I'd missed at the time. The gradual shift in Sarah's expressions, from gratitude to expectation. David's increasing comfort with luxury that didn't match his claimed financial struggles. My own growing fatigue in later pictures. The smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. But I could also see the love, genuine affection between all of us. Moments of real connection that hadn't been manufactured or manipulated. People aren't entirely good or entirely bad. Relationships aren't completely healthy or completely toxic. My family had been both loving and exploitative, both supportive and harmful. Learning to hold both truths simultaneously was part of growing older and wiser. I decided to make new photo albums, including pictures from our recent reconciliation. Emily helping me paint my new apartment, Sarah and me decorating Grace's nursery, David teaching Emily to grill burgers in their backyard. Evidence that people could change, that relationships could heal, that trust could be rebuilt. May brought a call from the community center asking if I'd be interested in leading a support group for seniors dealing with financial abuse by family members. We've had several people ask specifically for you, Maria Santos explained. They've heard about your situation and your successful resolution, and they want to learn from your experience. Leading a support group felt daunting, but also meaningful. If my painful experience could help other people navigate similar challenges, maybe it had served a larger purpose. The first group meeting was small. Just 4 other seniors dealing with various forms of financial exploitation. Robert, whose son was still forging checks. Margaret, whose daughter had convinced her to co-sign for a loan the daughter couldn't repay. James, whose grandson had improved but was still paying back money he'd stolen. And Helen, whose story almost perfectly mirrored my own. Adult children with hidden assets asking for money to cover basic expenses. How did you find the courage to say no? Helen asked. I got angry, I said honestly. And I realized that anger could be more useful than sadness. But how do you maintain family relationships afterward? Very carefully, with clear boundaries and realistic expectations. Do you trust them now? I thought about it. I trust them to behave consistently with the people they've shown themselves to be. They're capable of change, but they're also capable of reverting to old patterns if I enable them. How do you know the difference? You don't. You just pay attention and adjust your boundaries as needed. After the meeting, Helen asked if we could talk privately. My daughter called last night asking for money for her son's summer camp. I know they can afford it themselves, but she made it sound like an emergency. What do you want to do? I want to say no, but I'm afraid of losing access to my grandson. What would you tell someone else in the same situation? She laughed. I'd tell them to say no and see what happens. Good advice. 6 months later, Helen reported that she'd maintained her boundaries, and her daughter had adjusted her expectations. Their relationship was different, but more honest. June brought news that Emily had won a school art contest, and her winning piece would be displayed in a citywide student exhibition downtown. The entire family attended the exhibition opening, and I watched Emily explain her artwork to curious visitors with increasing confidence. Her piece was a mixed media collage about family relationships, incorporating photos, painted elements, and written words. One section showed hands passing money back and forth, with words like help and burden and love overlaid in different colors. Another section showed the same hands holding each other without any money visible, surrounded by words like respect and trust and choice. It's about how money can complicate love, she explained to a woman who'd stopped to admire the piece. But love doesn't always need money to be real. My 12-year-old granddaughter had processed our family's financial conflict and emerged with wisdom beyond her years. That evening over dinner, Sarah said, Emily's art piece made me think about our family differently. How so? About how much pain we caused by mixing money with love. About how much stronger our relationships are now that those things are separate. David nodded. She's a smart kid. Smarter than we were about emotional dynamics. She had a good teacher, Sarah said, looking at me. Someone who showed her that love means treating people with respect, not just giving them what they ask for. July brought my 75th birthday, the first one since our reconciliation. Instead of being forgotten or overlooked, it became a genuine celebration. Emily made me a photo book of our activities together over the past year. Sarah and David took me to dinner at an elegant restaurant downtown. The community center colleagues threw me a surprise party with cake and flowers. For the first time in years, I felt celebrated for who I was, rather than useful for what I could provide. That evening, as I sat in my apartment looking at birthday cards and gifts, I called Mrs. Alvarez to thank her for her support during the difficult period. Mija, you did the hard work yourself. I just reminded you that you deserved better. Sometimes that's all people need. Someone who believes they're worth fighting for. And now you believe it too. Yes, I said. Now I believe it too. August brought the news that David's business was successful enough that they were considering expanding to a second location. Real success this time. Built on actual work, rather than financed by exploiting elderly relatives. We keep talking about how different everything feels now, Sarah told me during one of our regular phone calls. Not just financially, but emotionally. Different how? We don't feel like we're always scrambling or hiding or managing crises. David says it's like we can finally enjoy the life we've built instead of constantly worrying about maintaining it. That sounds wonderful. It is. And Mom, I know we've said this before, but we really are sorry for making you part of our financial stress for so long. Thank you for saying that. Again, do you think Emily understands what happened? Really understands? She understands that you made mistakes and worked to fix them. She understands that relationships work better when they're honest. That's probably enough understanding for a 12-year-old. September brought Emily's first day of high school at the Arts Magnet program. She was nervous but excited, carrying the confidence she'd built over the past 2 years of family healing. I picked her up after her first day and took her for ice cream to hear about her classes and teachers and new classmates. Grandma Evie, do you think people can really change? What makes you ask that? Some of my friends have family problems and they don't think their parents will ever be different. But Mom and Dad did change, didn't they? People can change their behavior when they have good reasons to change and support for making the effort. What was their good reason? They realized they were going to lose something important if they didn't change. You? Our whole family's relationship with each other. I'm glad they changed. Me too, sweetheart. October brought the second anniversary of my discovery of their financial deception, and I found myself reflecting on the journey from betrayal to reconciliation. 2 years ago, I'd been a woman who defined her worth through her usefulness to others, who equated love with financial sacrifice, who couldn't imagine saying no to family requests regardless of the personal cost. Now I was a woman who lived comfortably within her means, who maintained family relationships based on mutual respect rather than financial dependency, who felt confident in her own value independent of what she could provide for others. The transformation hadn't been easy or quick. It had required legal action, boundary setting, difficult conversations, and the willingness to risk losing relationships that were already damaged by dishonesty. But it had been worth it. Not just for me, but for Emily, who was learning to navigate relationships based on honesty rather than manipulation. For Sarah and David, who had learned to manage their financial lives without exploiting others. For all of us, who had discovered that love could survive accountability. November brought news that Sarah was pregnant again, their third child and probably their last. I was genuinely happy for them, and for the first time in years, my happiness wasn't complicated by worry about how their growing family would impact my finances. We're excited but nervous, Sarah told me. 3 kids is going to be a lot. You'll manage beautifully. We're going to ask you for help sometimes. Babysitting, not money, she added quickly, and we'll pay you for your time. Sarah, you don't need to pay me to spend time with my grandchildren. We want to. It feels better for everyone when we treat your time as valuable. December came again, bringing the third Christmas since the beginning of our healing process. This year's celebration was at their house in Evanston, with baby Grace toddling around and Emily proudly showing off her high school artwork. The gifts were thoughtful rather than expensive. Time together was relaxed rather than tense. Conversation flowed naturally without hidden agendas or unspoken resentments. After dinner, Emily showed me her latest art project, a painting of our family that included everyone arranged in a circle rather than a traditional hierarchy. Why did you arrange us this way? I asked. Because we're all equal, she said matter-of-factly. Nobody's more important than anybody else. That night, as I rode the train home to my Lakeview apartment, I thought about Emily's painting and her simple wisdom. We were all equal. Nobody's needs were more important than anybody else's. Love worked better when it was based on that fundamental understanding. New Year's Eve found me hosting my first family celebration in my new apartment. Sarah, David, Emily, and baby Grace came over to watch the fireworks over Lake Michigan from my windows. Emily had made resolutions for everyone. Sarah resolved to read more books. David resolved to spend more time outdoors. Baby Grace's resolution, according to Emily, was to learn 10 new words. What's your resolution, Grandma Evie? to keep learning new things, and to keep being proud of the life I've built. What's my resolution? What would you like it to be? To be as brave as you are, as brave as I am. My granddaughter saw me as brave, not as a victim or a source of financial support or a problem to be managed, but as a woman who had faced difficult circumstances and chosen courage. At midnight, we sang Auld Lang Syne and made wishes on the fireworks blooming over the lake. My wish was simple: for more years of this kind of love, complicated but honest, challenging but respectful, imperfect but real. The months that followed brought ordinary life: Emily's adolescent struggles with school and friends, Sarah's pregnancy complications that she managed without asking me for financial help, David's business challenges that he solved through his own resources and creativity. I continued leading the support group, helping other seniors navigate financial abuse by family members. Each person's story was different, but the underlying dynamics were remarkably similar. Adult children who felt entitled to their parents' resources, elderly parents who equated love with financial sacrifice, families that confused need with greed, support with exploitation. Not all of the stories had happy endings. Some seniors chose to maintain financial boundaries and lost contact with their children as a result. Others chose to preserve family relationships at the cost of their financial security. But all of them learned to make conscious choices rather than defaulting to guilt and obligation. All of them discovered that they had more power in their family relationships than they'd realized. My own story continued to evolve. Emily graduated from high school and was accepted to art school with scholarships and financial aid that didn't require family assistance. Sarah and David's third child was born healthy, a son they named Harold after my late husband. The choice of name moved me to tears. They'd honored my marriage and my loss in a way that acknowledged my importance to their family beyond my financial contributions. "We wanted him to carry something forward from you and Dad's legacy," Sarah explained when they announced the name. "The way you two loved each other, the way Dad supported your independence, the way you both valued family without sacrificing yourselves for it." Baby Harold grew into a toddler who called me Gigi, a name Emily had chosen because it sounded artistic and sophisticated. I spent Saturday afternoons with all three grandchildren, reading stories and playing games and teaching Emily advanced knitting techniques. Those afternoons were some of the happiest hours of my life, not because I was needed, but because I was wanted. Not because I provided financial value, but because I brought love and attention and the kind of patient presence that grandparents uniquely offer. Emily's art continued to explore themes of family, money, and relationships. Her senior project was a series of paintings called The Cost of Love, examining how families navigate financial dynamics across generations. One painting showed an elderly woman's hands holding both money and a young girl's hands, with the money slowly fading away while the handhold remained strong. Another showed a family dinner table where the food was warm and abundant, but the money underneath the table had completely disappeared. It's about learning the difference between love that costs something and love that's priceless, she explained at her senior art show. Sarah and David stood next to me admiring her work. And David said quietly, "She learned that from watching you refuse to let money define your worth to us. She learned it from watching all of us figure out how to love each other better." Now 3 years since my discovery of their financial deception and 2 years since our successful reconciliation, I sit in my comfortable apartment watching the sunset over Lake Michigan with a glass of good wine and a heart full of gratitude. Not gratitude for the painful journey, but gratitude for what it taught me about my own strength, about the difference between enabling and loving, about the fact that people can change when they have genuine motivation and support. I think about the woman I was 4 years ago, desperately giving away money I couldn't afford to spare, measuring my worth through my usefulness to others, afraid to say no because I thought it would mean losing love. That woman was brave in her own way, generous and self-sacrificing and devoted to family. But she hadn't learned the difference between love and exploitation, between helping and enabling, between being needed and being valued. The woman I am now understands those differences. I love my family deeply, but I don't need their approval to feel worthy. I help when asked and when appropriate, but I don't sacrifice my security for their convenience. I'm needed sometimes and wanted always, and I've learned that wanting is actually more precious than needing. Emily calls me every Sunday evening, not because she needs something, but because she enjoys our conversations. Sarah and I meet for coffee once a month, sharing our thoughts about books and politics and the challenges of raising children in an uncertain world. David includes me in family decisions not because my financial contributions are required, but because my perspective is valued. These relationships are more honest and more satisfying than the ones we had when money was the invisible thread connecting us. Love based on choice rather than obligation, respect rather than guilt, equality rather than dependency. Sometimes people ask me if I regret the legal action, the confrontation, the temporary estrangement that came with setting boundaries. The answer is always no. Temporary pain led to permanent healing. The crisis revealed problems that were already present and created an opportunity to address them honestly. Would this approach work for everyone? Probably not. Some families aren't willing or able to change, and some seniors aren't in positions to risk temporary estrangement for long-term respect. But for us, it worked. The willingness to lose relationships that weren't serving anyone created space for relationships that serve everyone better. My advice for anyone facing similar challenges is this. Start by believing you deserve to be treated with respect. Not because you're perfect or because you've never made mistakes, but because you're a human being whose feelings and needs matter. Set boundaries based on your values rather than your fears. Fear of loneliness, fear of conflict, fear of being disliked will always push you toward accepting treatment that diminishes your dignity. Values of honesty, respect, and mutual care will guide you toward relationships that enhance your well-being. Be prepared for the possibility that not everyone will adjust to your boundaries gracefully. Some people benefit from exploitative dynamics and will resist change. That resistance is information about their priorities, not evidence that you're wrong to expect better treatment. Give people opportunities to demonstrate change, but pay attention to behavior rather than promises. Apologies are meaningful only when they're followed by different choices. And remember that love doesn't require sacrifice of your financial security, your emotional well-being, or your sense of self-worth. Real love enhances these things rather than diminishing them. As I finish this story, sitting in my beautiful apartment surrounded by evidence of my own worth and my family's genuine care, I want to ask you a question. Have you ever found yourself in a relationship where love felt like obligation, where your worth seemed tied to what you could provide rather than who you were, where saying no felt impossible even when saying yes hurt you? If the answer is yes, please know that you deserve better. You deserve to be loved for who you are, not for what you can give. You deserve relationships based on mutual respect, rather than one-sided sacrifice. Share your story in the comments below. Let's support each other in building relationships that truly serve love, rather than exploiting it. And if this story resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe to this channel. Every person who hears this message and recognizes their own worth is a victory worth celebrating. Because at the end of the day, we all deserve love that doesn't cost us everything we have, respect that doesn't require us to diminish ourselves, and family relationships that make us stronger rather than smaller. That's my story. That's my truth. Thank you for listening, and thank you for believing that we all deserve to be treated with the dignity we offer to others.